The following is a production of KYNE TV in cooperation with UNO Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and informational program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Consider This, one of the most influential women in the history of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, is retiring this year. And she is Connie Clausen. I am proud to know her from the year when women's athletics started at the university. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Is we're going to sort of follow the history, a saga of women's athletics here at UNO, and probably very exemplary of what was happening across the country, sort of following her history here. Welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
It's kind of noisy here, but you're used to a noisy field house.
As long as I can hear you, we'll be fine.
We're in the Student Center at UNO, and we like to be where it's at, and this time of the day on a Thursday, that's one of the places it's at. 1969 was the first year of women's athletics. It was the first year I came to the university in the fall of '69, and that's when I met you. And things were pretty prehistoric.
They were. We didn't even have athletics at the beginning in '69. I was called by the late Carl Kelly from the Omaha Softball Association asking if we would be host to the Women's College World Series, and probably a lot of people don't realize that the Women's College World Series started in Omaha. And so I decided that if we were going to be the host, we probably needed to have a team.
Field a team, as they say.
That's right, so we did. We played 2 games, got beat, and that was it, but that was the beginning of athletics, women's athletics at UNO.
When that started, when people said, well, you know, we're going to help host this and we're going to have a team, sort of like build it and they will come.
Right.
But it didn't come right away. But what was the reaction around campus or the power? I suppose they didn't even really realize it.
Right. Nobody. Actually, Dean Kennedy was Dean of the College of Education, and so I asked
And the physical education was what you were under.
Right. I was in the physical education department. I was chair of the women's physical education department. I also had the Women's Recreation Association. And so I went to Dean Kennedy and said, some of the ladies want to start competing on teams, and I have no money, but there is some money in Women's Recreation Association. He said, if you can do what you need for Women's Recreation Association and use some money for athletics, you go right ahead. So that was the beginning. You know, maybe we had $1,000, not much.
And then there was the whole issue of, I mean, that we even take for granted now, because they worry now about training tables and physical conditioning. I mean, those are the big, but we're talking about not having equipment to play and certainly no uniforms.
See, we started with softball, well, because of the Women's College World Series, and I also played softball, so I felt somewhat comfortable coaching it. I also knew that I could go to my softball coach, the late Jack McCauley, and borrow the uniforms that we played in, so I could, and the equipment, the bats, the balls, and of course there were many women that played summer softball, so they already had their gloves, whatever, so that's how we could start with softball.
These, now to me they seem girls, but I can remember being 18, 19, 20, these young women. What was their experience to be like the first?
Well, you know, they appreciated everything they could get, even if they could get a hamburger. They would dye their uniforms because we got blue shorts and yellow sweatshirts in the bookstore, and so we all tried to dye the blue shorts black so that we'd at least have some colors of the university. You know, here we are in yellow and black instead of red and black, but it was what you could buy in the bookstore. They just appreciated everything you did because they knew we were volunteering our time. We weren't getting paid to coach, and they just appreciated it so much. And they still, Joy Ledger Scanlon will come back and just talk about the old days, and she says, do these ladies really appreciate what they have now? And I said, I think they do.
I think they do too. You moved to the era where you were just scrambling for, you know, as you said, somebody to maybe give them a hamburger, volunteer some food, or make a donation, to the times when the federal government, via the Congress, said, you have to give women some equity in sports, or at least begin to the Title IX era. But you can't make that happen by writing a regulation in a bill.
Right, that was in 1972 when Title IX was passed. And what's ironic is when Title IX was passed, it does not have a word in there about athletics. Some lady was trying to get a job, and when she interviewed afterwards, one of her friends said, "You came on too strong for a woman." And that's why she didn't get the job. They said, "You're very qualified, but you're too strong for a woman." And she realized that that wasn't right, that was discrimination. So she eventually talked to others and got Title IX taken into law.
So it was meant to be the workplace.
Right,
originally.
the workplace, and you can't discriminate because of sex. And so then all of a sudden we got into athletics, and Title IX's really known for athletics, which they really hadn't even thought about when it first came about.
Well, I think its legacy is athletics, because the young girls, that was an area in school. I remember growing up and going to a Catholic school in Omaha, and they had two boys' sports, CYO basketball and baseball. And I remember saying to the poor nun that is still the principal today. In fact, I think she may retire this year. "Sister, you know, the Catholics think that, you know, it's good that women have babies, and don't you think they should be in good shape, and don't you think we could have at least one sport?" And the poor woman nearly had a heart attack. Now she's way different now, but I mean, that
Sure.
was,
Well,
but that affected the future thinking of women.
sure, some of the women physical educators at that time or before that time, you know, even said, "I'm not sure if it's good for a woman to run up and down the basketball court."
They talked
You know,
about their breasts going up and down,
That's
and,
right,
and all kinds of things.
Yeah, you look at the evolution of basketball. Really, you first started where there were 9 squares on the basketball court, and for the girls, and then you'd rotate from one square to the other, so you didn't have to do much running. And then finally, Iowa had the half court for many years.
Oh, yeah.
And then you went with a rover where all of a sudden they said, "Hey, we'll have 2 women on each team that can run up and down the full length of the court."
That was a big concession.
That was a big concession, you know, and then pretty soon we're at 5-player running up and down because they realized that we didn't drop over dead and nothing happened, and you know,
No permanent damage.
Right, but the women were, you know, some of our own worst enemies, saying, "No, you shouldn't do that. That's not going to be good."
In some ways, that hasn't changed a lot. But so we had Title IX. Now, how did the university? I mean, who said what to whom first? You know, or did the in athletic circles they said, "Hey, maybe this is a way we can help our women get some of the things that."
Yeah, it didn't come that easy. I was very fortunate. I had some parents, you know, I would read some articles and I would listen to others, and they'd say, if you can get parents to help fight the cause for you so you don't put your neck on the line, you'll do much better. And
Very
so,
political atmosphere.
that's right. I was very fortunate. I had Mary Ellen Drickey that helped me a great deal. Her daughter was an athlete, wanted to participate. The Rudloffs had daughters that wanted to participate. The late Bob Geringer had daughters that wanted to participate. So they got in there and they helped, and they would go to the chancellor and to the media and try to get some interest going, and they really fought my battle for me.
Help me recall, and I remember I was on the student newspaper at the time, because I was here for a few years. A Board of Regents meeting. Do you remember that, where they were considering funding, or maybe it was the Hyper building, or but there were a group of parents, Mary Ellen, that kind of put it to the regents and said, you know.
I think that might have been the Hyper building, because the Hyper building being approved meant so much for the women, because as most people know that went to school back then, the women were in the Quonset hut. And to try to practice.
A World War II vintage metal hut.
Right, and you tried to play volleyball in that, or try to even throw a softball. It was pretty difficult. So it meant that if the field house if the health, physical education, recreation was built, then we could move from the Quonset hut to the field house. We could have offices there, because our locker room for women's athletics was the corner of the shower room of the physical education women's locker room. We were in a corner of a shower room. So
in a hut.
No, this is over in the field house. because we're finally, I jumped ahead, we're finally getting to practice some nights and weekends in the field house when the men weren't using it.
But the hybrid building, we should say that's what, health, physical,
Education,
recreation building. That allowed them to then make some, it freed up some time and space by letting some practice go on at the new hybrid
Right.
building to redo the field house.
Well, yeah, plus then we got all the locker rooms because physical education moved over to the new physical education building, and so then all the locker rooms then were renovated so that we had brand new locker rooms, shower rooms just for athletics. We had our own offices so that now you had men and women athletes, coaches together. You know, and we were to the point where pretty soon it was going to be, okay, this year some of the women are going to move over and have offices here. Some of the men will move to the Quonset hut. And Don Leahy was ready to do that because I was very fortunate.
He was athletic director.
Right. Don Leahy was
The first time.
the first time, very supportive of our program. And Del Weber was always very supportive of our program. And we were also fortunate because when we went to the legislature to get some money for women's athletics, we were fortunate because there was money available at that time. Now, you know, you don't even think about going to the legislature to ask for more money for athletics.
Okay, we don't want to jump ahead, but I do want to mention that fight for the Hyper building, which I think was not only monumental for women's athletics, but for this campus.
Yes, yes.
To feel like a campus, to be, you know, because the students would come here, they can use that. It's used by students for their physical health, and it's part of the growth of this campus. But I think it was sort of a landmark in time that we were going to be a real college campus with some things on it.
Right, and I believe that building was vetoed at least 2 or 3 times. Dick Flynn worked really hard on that, who's now Dean of the College of Education. At that time, he was director of the School of Health, Physical Education, Recreation.
All right, so now we have a space and we have a place, and we're not in a hut anymore. And I say we like
Hey,
I can't walk.
You're part of us, Carol.
I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, but I remember this like it was yesterday. But then we hit a time when the entire state of Nebraska was feeling a crunch. We had just gone through a drought. Legislatures had to reconvene off-season to cut spending, and that was about the time that the we won't call them leaps, but the hefty little jumps that women's athletics made, and athletics in general on this campus, kind of hit a reality check.
That was when we had some major budget cuts.
Statewide.
Statewide, and athletics was hit for about $350,000, which was a big chunk of our budget at that point in time that we had to come up with.
So that was a watershed.
Yes.
And I remember hearing the quote of what was a young woman on the track team, which had to be discontinued. One of those hard decisions. She said that, and you said that the coach at the time had instilled in them being able to take the bad with the good.
Right.
And
right.
But some good did come out of it.
Excuse me. And, you know, and I look back on that. Had that happened, say, 2 or 3 years ago, with Title IX finally getting some strength to it, and with gender equity coming on board, there's no way that we would have dropped a women's program. We would not have been able to have dropped track, because you can't do that anymore with gender equity. So, you know, and maybe if I would have been a little more knowledgeable of what was happening at that point in time, maybe I would have stood up a little more and said, hey, we can't drop this. The men already have so many more opportunities than the women. The women need to continue with these opportunities, but it wasn't at the right time. Now you don't drop women's sports.
But you dropped it, and you came to, as I said, a reality check was that we're going to have to look outside the university.
Right. And so we really have worked hard at getting outside funding to help not only women's athletics but men's athletics, and we were able to reinstate track and field for women.
But you know, at that time, in some places like Iowa high school, basketball was always popular, but women's athletics, even at Nebraska, was not an easy sell to corporations to say, come on board and sponsor us. But you had some that stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, and I was fortunate back then, I'll get to this. Back then, the strong schools in athletics were the Wayne States. The smaller schools that had basketball, they were the schools that were the schools to beat. Now, you know, Wayne wouldn't have a chance 10 out of 11 times playing Lincoln in basketball, but Wayne State was the basketball team. So we did go out and we did try to get money, and I was fortunate that Pepsi-Cola came to the plate, and without me asking, they called. I remember Buzz Stibbs calling me and saying, "Is there any way we can help?" And after I got up off the floor, I said, "You certainly can," because it wasn't a thing to do at that point in time, is to help women's athletics. Now, you know, we're very fortunate because we have lots and lots of great people that help us and volunteers, and you know, you certainly have given us a lot of time and your talent to help us, and major you know, this year Lozier has stepped up the plate and helped us, and Cox Communications and Light 96 and you at KFAB, and so many people help us out that we do appreciate it.
But when that happened, did you really know what to do with them other than to, I mean, this was, I think, in all of athletics, this working with the partnerships with the commercial entities, this was a whole new field. I mean, here you're just sort of managing now. We've got sports, we can give out scholarships, my Lord, and we can even give release time to coaches and even have a full-time coach, and now this was a whole new world for athletics in general.
Mm-hmm. And we had to learn how to fundraise. We had to learn how to market products, because now, you know, back then I think we were getting some money because some of them were feeling sorry because we'd had budget cuts. We had friends, they were willing to give us some money, but now it pretty much has to be a win-win situation. You don't find a lot of corporations, businesses that will give you money if they're not going to get something in return. So we've learned to work very hard and make it a win-win situation.
Well, winning is not everything, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, winning's very important.
Well, let's talk about the Women's Walk. We're on the verge of another one. How many, I should know this, how many years is it?
13.
13. And this is the year you hope to hit, and this is your last year here. You're hoping to make the overall gross of the Women's Walk $1 million.
Right.
And Diet Pepsi has stuck with you.
They have.
That's unusual for in any endeavor, to be able to keep a sponsor that sticks with you and wants to. And
see, one of the things that we tried to do, and I had Don Skane and Dave Castello were good mentors to me. You know, we'd sit down and they say, well, now, you know, you need to go to someone where they need the women for their clientele.
Oh yeah, we chicks drink a lot of Diet Cola.
Who goes to the store? Who buys the beverages? The women do. So it was, you know, it was a natural, and Pepsi is the drink on this campus. It was a natural to get more involved with them. But I worked very hard, and people sometimes think that if I cut myself, Pepsi's going to run out instead of blood.
Well, yeah, you have said Diet Pepsi and Pepsi a few times.
Because they have done so much for us, and they were the ones that came and said, can we help? And that means a lot. So I try very hard to be very loyal to the people, the businesses that are going to help us out.
The Women's Walk for Athletics is probably, and I've said this many times and I mean it because I've covered and attended and spoken at a lot of events, annual events, is probably one of the premier events through your work and all the women that have volunteered, and men. There have been, I still get a kick out of the faculty cheerleaders that come every year with their signs. It is a premier activity, but it is, men can walk this year, but it is unique in its beauty that it is women pulling together from all over the community
and helping women. The money from the Diet Pepsi Women's Walk goes for scholarships and travel. I think we can almost drop off the travel because we will soon be at 9 sports for women. So all the money that we're going to be raising from the Diet Pepsi Women's Walk will go towards scholarships for those females. But it is a fun event, and it's only a half hour, and we try to make it as easy as possible for the women and this year the men that want to participate.
I think that the neatest thing is to see the young women come, the daughters brought with the mothers, seeing. I don't think there's anything that physically exemplifies in this city. The women's breast cancer walk I think is another one. The Walk for the Cure, but that gives young women the idea. All these women, doing something for women. It's pretty neat.
It is, and this year we're hoping that we'll have 1,500 women, and our goal, as you know, because we set it together, is to raise $150,000, and I'm not aware of another walk that raises $150,000. It's a major part, major step to
And we
help
can
us.
thank Diet Pepsi and Logier and First National
First
Bank.
National, Union Pacific Railroad, Cal Energy, lots and lots of people that are
they
helping
put that
us.
money down to give us something to build on.
And First Data, we got great things going on with First Data, but they're also helping us with the Women's Walk. So, we could take a half hour and I could just
we could
go
name all
over
people
everybody
and-
that's helped us so much, right?
The whole issue of gender equity
Yes.
is actually statewide on the university system. The issue of equity in general has become an issue on the Lincoln campus and everything. Athletics has almost, probably in large part to Title IX and whatever, but it almost sets the pace for equity, at least gender equity, in the university system.
We are so fortunate at this university with the gender equity plan that Don Leahy, Bob Dannenauer, and I put together. We had one of these wonderful trips, a meeting up to Fargo, North Dakota. So I had these two guys in the car for 8
You were
hours
going up for a game and
for a meeting.
For a meeting?
So I had them there 8 hours. They didn't have
Did
any
you talk
phones with
their
them,
head
and
off?
we did a gender equity plan, 8 hours going up and 8 hours coming back, and that was the beginning of a wonderful plan that, and we talked about hockey, and we've always talked about hockey being a 5-sport program. Hockey 1, soccer for women, swimming, diving for women, tennis and golf for women. So
That hockey would help enable.
hockey is
At least-
paying for our gender equity program. So
Go
if,
UNO hockey.
if people are complaining about priority seating, the money that we're getting from hockey is paying for the 4 other women's sports, which we needed to do if we were to add a men's program. You'll see very few universities anymore adding men's sports because they have to get the number of women athletes up to the number of men athletes, male athletes.
That's something I don't think the community realizes.
Right.
That when they think of hockey as a quantum leap for the university and I think for this community,
Oh,
that
definitely.
they don't see that it's exponential in the number of students it's helping educate and put through team sports.
And the great thing that it's doing for the university. Throughout the United States, people are talking about University of Nebraska at Omaha hockey.
Well, and that blew everybody away, Division II school, hopping into Division I with a hockey team, which is a little tough. It's a tough nut to crack. At least it doesn't have huge numbers of players, and it's not quite as expensive as football, but it's not a cheap sport.
Hockey is very expensive. I mean, when you're recruiting in Canada and in lots of places, and the equipment's expensive, and play a lot of games. Football you don't play that many games. Hockey you play lots of games. So hockey is very expensive to have, but it also brings in a lot of revenue. Thank goodness.
Absolutely. We have just a few minutes left, and I don't want to get maudlin, but this is your last year. Not that anyone will get rid of you, because I know you will be around physically and in spirit, but not to mention your mom.
That's right.
Mrs. C is
Hi, Mom. She's listening right now, wherever you are.
her chocolate chip cookies and her
Right.
support. And she's still, how old is she? And she walks in that walk every year?
She just turned 87, and she raises over $1,000 every year. Works very hard at it.
She's a trip. It's worth the price of admission just to come and see her. What a spirit. But what are you proudest of that you have done and that the university has done? And obviously there's a combo action there.
I think probably the advancement of women in sports, and certainly the gender equity plan where we're going to have 9 women's sports. I'm really proud of the opportunities that women are going to have to compete, because athletics does so many great things for men, for women. Too bad we didn't get to do that, or I didn't have that opportunity other than playing summer softball. I'm real happy about that, and I'm also happy that our program didn't do anything to hurt the men's program. We did not drop men's sports.
Siphon off.
Right. So, you know, we've been able to do that without hurting anybody. I guess all the friendships, everybody that I've gotten to know, and friends. And
I think that the fact that there was such a good, and I should mention that Connie is Associate Athletic Director. I mean, for those of you who have not realized that she, well, she should be, but there was a great match between you and Don Leahy, and a lot of other people and coaches and whatnot. But there, you know, that kind of thing only happens once in a while, where you can get a like-minded kind of, be on the same plane, on the same page.
It's been wonderful.
And not have an ego thing going there.
No,
I can honestly.
No, we did not. It's wonderful. And Bob Dannenhauer, he's outstanding. Gee whiz, he gets so much done. He's got so much energy.
He does. He wears me out just
yes.
watching him in a room.
Yep.
He's the new athletic director.
Yep.
We have a minute left, and number one, I do want to say that at UNO, in men's or women's, the term student athlete is not an oxymoron.
Right.
And many people laugh when you say student athlete. Men's and women particularly, but women's and men have both been student athletes. What do you say to the community when they say, I'm glad UNO is doing well in athletics, but you know, what does that mean for academics in the community, and what does that mean for contributing to the community after these people get out? They're athletes.
Well, we work very hard on encouraging our student athletes to stay in the Omaha area or in Nebraska, so that they can continue to give their expertise to the state to help out with the community. We emphasize volunteerism with our student athletes so that they can become great citizens and help out with this community, because everyone needs to work and help out to make Omaha better, metropolitan area better. And we think that we've got some outstanding student athletes to do that.
Who have developed, are graduates of the team experience, and are probably pretty good team players.
That's right. You learn so much from athletics.
Well, Connie, I know I've been acting like a cheerleader here, but I always could cheerlead better than I could run. So that's what I'm doing today. I want to thank you for being with us, and thank you for all your years here at UNO.
And thank you for being chair of our Diet Pepsi Women's Walk.
Not a problem. Thanks for joining us on Consider This.